Tilea's Troubles, Part 77. A Great Council. First prequel to the Battle of the Valley of Death. Early autumn, 2403. At long last, a force capable of striking a deadly blow at the vampire duchess's horrid hegemony of the north had assembled, and not a moment too soon, for her foul servants had reached further south than ever before. Consisting of 5 armies from different city-states, including a multitude of mercenaries, it was vast in size. Its soldiers hailed from all over Tilea and beyond, from Estalia, the Empire, and even far-flung Cathay, with dwarf and halfling regiments as well as those of men. Their assembly spawned a sprawling camp, filling an entire valley in the wide, low hills west of Trantio. At the camp's heart stood a massive tent where the Allies' council of war was to begin. Having travelled with the last of the 2 armies to arrive, Archlector Bernardo Ugolini now made his way to that tent, accompanied by several of his Cathayan bodyguards. As he rode, he scrutinised the soldiers he passed to satisfy himself that there was indeed enough strength in the armies already present to make his about-to-be-proposed plan viable. In truth, he had expected more. The Verezzan and Luccinan contingents appeared to be significantly depleted in strength. Perhaps, he thought, they were divided, and so also distributed elsewhere in the camp. But he knew this was unlikely, for it was not at all the usual practice. As the massive Portomaggioran army made up for any deficiency in numbers on the lesser realm's behalf, he did not let it worry him. Indeed, his spirits were sufficiently lifted to put a smile upon his face. The Tileans in the camp saw this as a sign of his pleasure, his happy blessing upon them, and respectfully made the sign of more as he passed. Even Mamidia-worshipping soldiers knew which god to pray to when facing the undead. He was reassured to see his own Reman artillery in the camp, being tended to by his experienced gunners and matrosses. He had already passed several such pieces, possessed by other armies in this Grand Alliance, and it pleased him that he too had been able to provide such engines of war. His expression grew stern as he approached the command tent, for he knew full well that there was work yet to be done inside, and no guarantee of success. He had marched with enough conglomerate armies, advising and even commanding them, to know that it was never easy to reach a consensus concerning strategy. What with the commanders from no less than 5 different states, several of whom did not merely distrust each other, but had effectively been enemies until the dire threat of undeath had forced them to cooperate, he expected the canvas walls to house a veritable cornucopia of conflicting concerns, incompatible priorities, and discordant interests. More than this, there would most likely be disagreements between officers within the same army. Passing Lord Alessio Falcone's guards, both outside and in, he discovered a gathering of officers and their attendants around a central table. Lord Alessio of Portomaggioran was immediately apparent, standing beneath a painted silken banner sporting his family's golden falcon, with an eclectic collection of what must be his captains gathered around him. He was well known to have travelled widely, and it appeared he had brought some of those he had encountered back with him. Upon thinking this, Bernardo had to suppress a new smile, for of course he himself was guarded by strangely garbed Cathayans. The young Lord Silvano, whom Bernardo knew very well indeed from their shared adventures and who had rode with him from Remus, was already in attendance, liveried in Pavonan blue and white, and thus almost identical to the blue and white of Lord Alessio's army. Some childish remnant lurking in the corner of Bernardo's mind wondered whether this was perhaps a sign that the 2 armies would work well together. No doubt some of the officers were from Verezzo and Lucchini, but Bernardo could not see young King Ferronso amongst them, nor his good friend from youth, the philosopher Lord Lucha of Verezzo. Perhaps they had yet to arrive. What could possibly delay them, considering their armies had reportedly been marching for more than a week alongside the Portomaggioran's? Perhaps their absence had something to do with the small numbers of their soldiers outside. As he took his allotted place, A place of honour at the head of the table, to the right of the Allied Army's Captain-General, Lord Alessio Falcone, he presumed all would become clear momentarily. Many amongst the officers made the sign of more, and Bernardo acknowledged them graciously by lifting his hand in a sign of blessing and saying a brief prayer in the ancient tongue of Tilea. Appropriately, it was the Captain-General, Lord Alessio, who then spoke. "Your Holiness, you're most welcome. I think I speak for all of us when I say we are mightily reassured by your presence amongst us, especially in light of the task that now faces us. May more protect us in the fight to come." Bernardo did smile now. "And I am most happy to be here with you, Captain-General, for here at last, it seems to me, upon my first impression, is gathered an army sufficient for the work of eradicating the vampire's evil from Tilea. More's blessings are most assuredly to be poured upon this army." "We are most happy, too, that you brought Lord Silvano with you," said Alessio, bowing slightly to the young Pavonan lord, who returned the gesture. "Though I have to ask, where is Duke Guidobaldo?" "My father felt it was his duty to return home," said Silvano. "Our city currently lies unprotected, a state of affairs that cannot be allowed to continue, now that the tyrant Bolderguts has slipped from our reach and the Vampire Duchess's army is so close." "Ah, yes," said Lord Alessio. "We marched north in the hope of defeating Bolderguts once and for all, to prevent his further devastation. Indeed, I fashioned this army with the brutes in mind. Now we are faced with a quite different foe. Pray tell, my Lord Silvano, if your father took leave with his army, what command is left to you?" "My father has fully honoured his commitments, taking only our horse soldiers and a newly raised regiment of Reman bravi. I now command our guns and household foot soldiers." "So he left behind only that which would slow him down as he went home," muttered a grizzled old soldier, heavily bearded and heavily armoured, wearing the yellow and blue of Arezzo. Lord Silvano showed no sign of displeasure at this disparaging remark. Bernardo had noticed that since the brutal blow to the young lord's head at the Via della Cletta, Silvano had suffered more than merely physical consequences. One of his eyes was now fashioned of glass, and he looked somehow older than his years. More noticeable, perhaps, was his distant nature, as if he were at one remove from that which occurred around him, as if, as one of the Reman priests had put it, he had taken a step closer to death. Here, now, when many others would have reacted angrily to such a comment, the young lord exhibited an absence of any emotion. "My father left me with exactly that which is best suited for an assault upon the walls of Trantio," explained Lord Silvano. Bernardo nodded. "More than that, my lord. Your father removed from our city those bravi left unemployed by the fall of so many noble houses during the recent unrest. Such men could have proved most troublesome to us had they not been given a new purpose. I am grateful to your father for this. And that the soldiers he left under your command are veterans who have proved themselves several times over in war. I, for one, would never criticise Duke Guidobaldo's desire to care for the well-being of his people." He glanced at the Verezzan captain to gauge the man's response. The fellow was an old veteran, an Empire mercenary by the looks of him, who simply stood calmly, as if nothing of consequence had happened. Bernardo supposed the man would have faced such horrors during his life as a soldier that he would barely register a little awkwardness in conversation. The comment had revealed the ongoing antipathy between Verezzo and Pavona, an old animosity recently reinvigorated by Lord Lucha's allegedly tardy rejection of Duke Guidobaldo's niece as a wife for his son. Bernardo had long suspected Duke Guidobaldo had engineered the perceived slight against him and his family's honour to serve his own purpose. The Pavonan Duke had a habit of conquering neighbouring city-states, each time claiming some matter of honour or revenge as a valid motive. Whether this were true or not, the bad feeling now revived between Verezzo and Pavona was real enough. Bernardo now addressed Lord Alessio. "I must ask, Captain General, where are King Ferronzo and Lord Lucha?" Lord Alessio showed only the hint of a frown, while several other officers glanced at each other, subtle signs revealing a general disquiet. "They too have left a portion of their forces under my command to honour their commitments," Lord Alessio answered, "and indeed, like the good lord, saw fit to ensure that those forces, were of the kind useful in an assault. Might I introduce Barone Jacopo Brunetti of Poliena, commanding the Verezzan brigade?" Here Bernardo thought Alessio was gesturing towards the grumbling Verezzan captain, but then realised there was a halfling standing by the man's side, who now bowed. The little Barone sported a heavy iron helmet and a cloak of Verezzan blue and yellow. Behind him was another halfling, an archer liveried in the same manner, and Captain Muzio Vanni. This time Alessio did indicate the plain-spoken Verezzan. Then Lord Alessio turned to address another. "And this is General Marsilio da Fermo, commander of the Luccinan brigade." General Marsilio was another old soldier, almost white-haired, in full, unadorned plate armour. He leaned upon a great battle-axe of an archaic design, its haft almost as tall as him. "Your presence, Barone Jacopo, General Marsilio, Captain," said Bernardo, "as well as that of those you command, pleases me greatly. But I must ask again, where are your masters?" "Blame the Sartosan scum for my king's absence," said General da Fermo. "Their love for gold means they care nothing for the living of Tilea. To them, this war merely presents an opportunity to raid the coastal cities while our armies are busy elsewhere." Bernardo had heard the rumours of increased Sartosan activity in the pirates' current, and of a northern seaman named Volker who was attempting to unite them. "The king has returned to Lucchini, then?" he asked. "Aye, but unlike Lord Silvano, he has left me with little more than a single regiment to command," said the general, sounding embittered. And well he might, thought Bernardo, for the rank of general sat ill alongside command of one single regiment. "And a great gun," said Lord Alessio. "Aye, but one single piece," said the Luccinan, with unconcealed contempt. It occurred to Bernardo that the young king might have been glad, at least, to leave this general behind, for the fellow did not seem to care about mincing his words, and youthful monarchs often had a certain fragile pride about them. "Then the pirates are to blame," declared Bernardo diplomatically, "and not King Ferronso. He cannot be expected personally to fight this foe while his people are being ravaged and robbed by corsairs." General Marsilio acknowledged the archlector with a nod. Bernardo turned to the halfling. "Barone Jacopo, I was looking forward to meeting again with Lord Lucha. I can only presume he too has other concerns." "A great many, your holiness. They weigh upon him heavily. If you would oblige?" asked the halfling, as he gestured for a servant, garbed in a flamboyant hat and carrying a polished brass horn, to come up. Bernardo nodded his assent, and the courtly youth stepped forwards, unravelled a paper, and began to read. "This to His Holiness Bernardo Ugolini, the righteous right hand of Moor, from your old friend Lucha. I pray you are well, and that your dreams treat you kindly. My heart is heavy with the knowledge that I shall not be with you before Trantio, and it pains me that you might think the less of me for it. Not willing to ask another to make excuses upon my behalf, I would by this missive explain myself to you, and all those with you who are to face the foul army threatening every Tilean realm. I know full well that the fate of every living Tilean hangs in the balance, and yet I cannot ignore the responsibilities of rule and the love and protection I owe my people. None presently know Razga Bouldergut's whereabouts, but it seems to me that the brute most likely intends to circumnavigate the great allied army in order to attack to the south. He has performed just such manoeuvres before, and despite defeat at your hands on the Via de Cleta, he went on to lay waste to Ridrafa. Furthermore, there are several congruous reports of a large band of greenskins this side of the mountains, sufficient in strength to extract a ransom from the Pavonan town of Scorsese. Knowing that you are bringing the armies of both Remas and Pavona to join with the Portomaggioran's, and that I have left you with all that is of real use in the assault to come, thus fashioning an army entirely capable of victory in the struggle ahead, I feel that the only course of action open to me is to return to Verezzo, to do what I can to keep my subjects safe from these other threats. Furthermore, it seems to me that were the rumours of an alliance between the vampires and brutes true, then it would be remiss to leave the allied army's rear unguarded, so that Razga could launch an attack to relieve Trantio. My soldiers can guard against just such a move. If I were a proud man, I would have stayed, but I am justly humbled by my duty to my people, obliged to accept sound reason, and beholden to take in the best course of strategic action. When it comes to the safe future of Tilea, however, I am yours to command, and so if I have chosen wrongly, then simply say so, and I will return immediately. Ever your servant, and always your friend, Lucha Vescusi, Lord of Verezzan. Bernardo dismissed the servant and thanked the barone. I do not doubt Lord Lucha's sincerity, he declared, for I know him to be as honest as he is wise. However, I was led to believe the army of the VMC is also marching north to aid us in this war, by way of Verezzan. Would they not be of use in defeating any brutes and goblins attempting to outflank us? In his wisdom, my master did take the VMC into account in his deliberations, your holiness, said the barone, but not as a reassurance, rather as a further cause for concern. He does not yet trust them, which in truth made for yet another reason to return home. Bernardo could not argue against his old friend's suspicions, for he himself did not know whether the Marienburgers were to be trusted. An army ruled by merchants was an unusual thing anywhere in the world, certainly in Tilea, and nothing the VMC had so far done proved their intentions were harmless. They had offered protection to Alcente, and now they ruled it. They promised to fight Kernagswag, and now they ruled all that they liberated from his forces. They had swallowed up Capelli without a fight, simply because the town knew it could not defend itself against such a force. And it was their soldiers who had thought to interfere somewhat unhelpfully with Raverno's self-inflicted troubles by raising the contado of Campanefro. There was even a rumour that the VMC had hired mercenary bands of goblins. Mind you, similar tales were told of Lord Alessio, so one could not single out the northerners on this account. Suddenly, the Verezzan captain spoke again. Nor did our master wish to fight alongside the Pavonan Duke. The halfling looked askance at his companion. Not so, Captain Muzio, he was quick to answer. Aye, maybe you're right, my lord, said the captain. If it was one of Lord Lucha's concerns, I'm sure it was very low on his list. One of Lord Alessio's officers, a bald, fierce-looking man in full plate armour leaning upon his sword like a cane, snorted in laughter at this. Lord Alessio did not rebuke the man, instead saying, No matter, even if it were true, we must put such petty animosities behind us, for the enemy threatens every Tilean. Like you yourself said, your holiness, and it seems Lord Lucha also believes, we have a force entirely sufficient for the task in hand. So now, shall we proceed with formulating our plan of attack? I would know first what powder each army has available, for the walls of Trantio are strong, and will require much battering if we are to breach them. My lord Silvano, were the walls breached during your father's war against Prince Girenzo? They were, Captain General, answered the young Pavonan lord, but they were fully repaired during our occupation of the city. I myself oversaw the commencement of the work, and received a report when it was completed, a matter of weeks before the ogres came. I do not believe the walls were in any way dismantled during the subsequent withdrawal from the city. You mean the flight from the city, after your soldiers stripped it of everything of worth, said Captain Muzio. Bernardo had had enough of this man. I suggest you hold your tongue, Captain, he said firmly, noticing the concern writ upon the faces of nearly all gathered, not least the captain's nominal commander, the halfling Barone Iacopo. If all you have to offer is accusations concerning Duke Guidobaldo's past actions, then it seems to me you are of little use to this council. I shall speak no more of it, your holiness, said the captain, and I apologise to all concerned for my over-hasty words. The young Pavonan lord's face showed nothing but indifference. If he had noticed the formality of the apology, perhaps revealing its superficial nature, he gave no sign. Bernardo, not for the first time, wondered why, as ever in Tilea, a tangle of complications invariably threatened to imbue any alliance with an intrinsic fragility. Already, several substantial absences meant this great army, large as it was nevertheless a much reduced version of its potentially massive size. And now those officers remaining were exhibiting their ongoing mutual distrust before a plan had even been discussed. He had learned the hard way that every commander in a composite force such as this had their own priorities, fears and desires, their own different plans concerning how to achieve victory. Even their ideas of what constituted victory varied. Despite these concerns, he knew he himself was to be guilty of exactly the same sort of contrariness. Still, what needed saying must be said. So he turned to Lord Alessio. "Before you proceed, Captain General, I would speak of my own concerns, for they will bear heavily upon the plans we make here." For the merest moment, Lord Alessio looked perplexed, but it did not last. Perhaps, thought Bernardo, his own bitter experiences meant the Captain General recognised the inevitable nature of the game they were now playing. "Of course, Your Holiness," said the Captain General. "I greatly value your guidance. We all do." The easy acceptance and subtle flattery of this comment did make Bernardo wonder about the man's sincerity. This was not the first time he had detected Lord Alessio's clever combination of both business and courtly skills. Such skills would serve him well in the juggling act of commanding such an army as this. Bernardo was counting on him possessing a similar talent for strategy. "No, what I am about to suggest comes from my own bitter experiences, not simply from prayerful contemplation," Bernardo began. "I sometimes feel I have been more soldier than churchman. I fought with the holy peasant army of Verezzan against the vampire duke at the bridge of Pontramola. Against the odds, perhaps, victory was gained by the hand of one man, General Urbano d'Alessio. May he find blissful rest in the garden of Moor. The vampire duke was slain, and his army faltered. Nevertheless, they escaped in force, and in all likelihood became the core of the vampire duchess's army. Worse than that, despite a victory bought dearly with the blood of many, the city of Verezzan was captured by the undead the very next day, when Lord Adolfo revealed himself to be a vampire. I was also amongst the army that recaptured Verezzan, along with brave Lord Silvano here, only to watch the vampire Lord Adolfo escape with his foul servants to attend his cruel mistress. Only recently I fought at the Via di Cleta, where the joint armies of Remus and Pavonan drove the tyrant Bolderguts from the Reman realm. This too was called a victory, for Bolderguts was prevented from reaching the Holy City. But then he marched on to raze Ridrafa to the ground, murdering its citizens, then escaping northwards in command of a significant force and hauling a vast train of loot stolen at such a cost in lives. Now he presents more than merely a thorn in our side, for he could yet, with perhaps minimal reinforcements, bring ruin to many more cities." Bernardo fell silent here for a moment, to let the miserable truth of what he had just said, how 3 of the greatest victories achieved in recent years had ultimately proved fruitless, sink in. He could not help but look at Lord Silvano, who was wounded at the Via di Cleta, but again saw only the same detachment. The rest waited in anticipation to hear why he was telling them this. "I will not allow another great sacrifice to be made, the death of thousands, so much suffering for so little gain. The foe must not be allowed to escape from Trantio, and so rally elsewhere. This time the enemy must be annihilated. Even if they flee the city, they must be caught and destroyed. Not one single foul servant can be allowed to return north to the vampire duchess." He paused again to judge the reaction of the men before him. They seemed solemnly agreeable so far. "So, I propose the following plan. I will, with the aid of Lord Silvano here, lead the armies of Remus and Pavonan north towards the Contada of Prato, while the rest of you assault the city. When you win, which you must surely do with the strength at your disposal, and our enemies again attempt an escape, we will intercept and utterly destroy them. In this way, the vampire's final defeat will truly have begun. As we speak, the fanatical army of the Disciplinati di Moor is pursuing the vampire duchess towards Urbino. When they catch her, she will have only what remains to her after the second assault on Verezzan, and nothing from this southern army to come to her aid. Even if the Disciplinati's army fails to destroy her army completely, we can march north with sufficient strength to deliver the necessary coup de grace." He knew that those gathered had not in their wildest dreams expected him to suggest dividing their strength at the very moment that such a force had at long last successfully been formed. But he had weighed everything as best he could, and was convinced the enemy could not prevail against the 3 armies from the south. No one spoke. They were waiting for Lord Alessio's reply. "I think," said the Captain General, "Your Holiness, you have the true measure of what's required of us. We cannot allow the enemy to slip away. Even if we surround the city, they could break through, as they've done before." Here Lord Alessio fell silent. "But to take 2 armies for a task that may not even prove necessary," said General Marsilio, "surely that is too much. It would weaken us critically before the walls of Trantio. If we cannot beat them, they will not run." "By your leave, Lord Alessio," said the bald-headed officer. "We need not send all the Remans and Pavonans, but rather send those from each army who are of little use in the assault. My own demigryphs, the Black Guard, and the Knights of the Lady would all be wasted before the walls, as would the rest of the horse." "But do we have sufficient horse to ensure victory over a retreating foe, Lord Black?" asked one of Lord Alessio's advisers, lurking in the rear, a short man who looked more courtier than soldier. Lord Alessio listened without turning, as if there were such a familiarity between the two that he need not do so. "King Fiorenzo took his mounted men-at-arms away with him. Lord Lucha took his light horse. Now we learn that Duke Guidobaldo's mounted knights have also gone." The Captain-General seemed to be pondering the courtier's concerns. Bernardo assumed he was counting riders in his mind. "Then the soldiers of my army will make up the shortfall," offered Bernardo. "This was my suggestion, and I would have my own forces committed to ensuring its success. My dwarfs cannot move as rapidly as the horse, but they can catch up every evening. My skirmishers and crossbowmen should also be sufficiently fleet of foot, certainly for the task in hand, for we're not asking them to travel a great distance. And we must, of course, send some of my fighting priests, for those we faced are our god's particular enemies, and my priest prayers could prove vital to success. I will stay here with you, for then I myself might channel Holy Moor's anger against the foe." "I can spare Captain Pandolfo and his Galipagon," said Barone Iacopo. "Its shots would barely chip the walls of Trantio, but could sting the foe in the open field." "Good, good," said Lord Alessio. "Then we can pursue your Holiness's plan, but with a force drawn from all armies, sufficiently strong, sufficiently fast. Lord Marcus here will command this interceptor force." "But Alessio, surely I should," interrupted Lord Black, somewhat familiarly, only to be silenced by Lord Alessio's raising of a hand. Bernardo assumed that Lord Black thought he himself ought to lead the interception force. "I'd have you, Ned, with me before the city walls. If some monstrous creature was to emerge, or hellish riders attempt the city's relief, then you and your demigryphs may be needed. I think it would be unwise to leave our flank unguarded before Trantio, considering what horrors may sally forth." "Lord General," came the thickly accented voice of the Arabian standing behind the Captain-General, "what about the Colossus? Whither would you have it go?" "It stays with me," ordered Lord Alessio. "The weight of the foe's magic will bear against us in the assault, and, though very thankful of the priest's prayers, I would fight like with like. You and your construct will protect the other flank."